Welcome to Senior Living Marketing Perspectives. I'm Debbie Howard with Senior Living Smart, and today I welcome one of our team members, our Director of Search, Chris Zook, who works at Senior Living Smart and keeps us up to date on all things related to Google ads and paid ads in general. And today we're going to be digging into the 2026 Google ad trends. So we just got past the first quarter. That's when we're recording this. Lots changed already in 26. We're seeing declining search volume for industry keywords, rising costs for conversions, and the impact of no-click AI search. So welcome, Chris. Let's dig into all of this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That's certainly a lot to get into. 2025 was a fun year, and 2026 is going to be just as fun.
Absolutely. Things are moving quickly. Let's start with rising costs because I think that's probably where a lot of people are seeing the impact to their budget. So we're seeing about 20 to 30% wasted spend in paid media accounts, while at the same time, keyword demand appears to be declining across care levels. We used to be able to count on some of those coveted keywords. Are we looking at really a demand problem, or is it how we're measuring things is changing, or is it really a channel mix issue that we need to address?
Yeah, I think that's the million-dollar question, and there are so many different things happening right now that give make it a bit of a mixed bag. And I'll start with the thing that's having the biggest impact. As anybody in Google Ads, or maybe you're working with a Google Ads agency, you've probably heard there's just been a ton of changes over the past 12 months in particular, even before that. We're looking at the past 2 years where Google has probably had more changes to its advertising platform than the preceding 5 years, maybe even 10. We had the advent of a campaign format called Performance Max a few years ago, which is basically just an automatic way to get your ads out through every single channel that Google has. We saw significant changes to search campaigns with the introduction of AI Max just last year. And I mention these specifically because they have one thing in common with one another, which is that they are both very heavily reliant on Google's AI as opposed to your manual inputs. So this creates an interesting idea because about the time that AI Max launched, things don't get adopted on Google Ads right away. It takes people some time. They want to make sure they do their research, have some expectations. A little bit after it launched, we started noticing this big spike in cost. And it wasn't just cost for keywords like assisted living near me. It was cost for, say, our clients' brand names. And it was something that had a big question in our heads. Why on earth would a brand name search go from being $1 per click last month to 45 this month? And that's not an exaggeration. That is the actual cost increase, which is just absolutely off the wall. And what our best thinking on it is that the introduction of all of these AI powered assets running behind the scenes in Google, doing things like matching keywords and revamping their broad match system and putting together what somebody means to say with the language that we use in senior living to convey an idea. It's taking a lot of liberties. See, your brand may be affiliated in your area with the concept of senior living in general, and now all of a sudden your brand name goes up because Google thinks someone's looking for senior living. I know that you're affiliated with senior living, and so are the three people who are also located in this town. And now all of a sudden, somebody's looking up your brand name, and there are three competitors bidding on top of your brand name that just weren't there before. And it's not through necessarily any fault of their own. They just flipped on a switch, and now Google is taking the rest. So that, I think, has been the biggest thing that we've really seen is just the shift from manual control and an advertiser's way of saying this is who I want to target to now it's very much more reliant on Google's understanding of an industry. I'll also say there are a couple other factors playing into it to a lesser extent, one of which is that the senior living industry is becoming more sophisticated. We're seeing this across the board with clients that we're getting, with questions that we get from anybody who is a client, anybody who isn't, just curious about the industry. And there is just a general growth in people's understanding of digital marketing that wasn't present a year or two ago. And also, along with that, a lot of questions that we weren't fielding a couple years ago. So this is, I think this year and the end of last year mark a point where there are a lot more companies using Google Ads that just weren't the year before. So we're seeing a more cluttered environment. We're seeing more competitors per area. And it's definitely having an impact. And the final thing I'll say, and this is, I think, the trend that is most fascinating to us, is that you were talking about keyword volume and how these things are changing over time. We're tracking keyword volume in some area through Google Ads itself. So this is straight from the horse's mouth kind of a thing. where about a year ago they would have, say, 60 searches per month on average for assisted living near me, and now they are down to 10, or in some cases now they're down to zero. And at the same time, what we're also seeing is that as those graphs show a trend down to zero for search volume, we're seeing a spike in search volume for things like in-home care. So it's an interesting dichotomy that perhaps it's economic, perhaps it's people who are a new generation that is learning about senior living for the very first time, and they just need to understand the difference between home care before assisted living. Whatever it may be, that is a major flip that we're watching in the senior living industry right now. A very long answer to your question, but there is a, suffice to say, there's just so much going on that it is causing change.
So it doesn't sound like you think that there are fewer people actually interested in or researching senior living. They're just doing it differently. And because they're doing it differently, Google is responding by changing how it's serving up maybe things that used to be very basic, because we used to put in keywords and it used to be a very short kind of senior living plus the name of a town or something like that, or maybe an adjective like best or luxury or value or affordable, right? But it was maybe 2 or 3 words. And AI has now given us permission to say, what's the best senior living for an 85-year-old with Parkinson's who needs a pool every day?
Yes, absolutely. And it's so funny because that's such a good example too, because in terms of users have all, the one thing I'll say about AI, Google Ads, SEO, anything that you want to name in that regard, the core concept that is always consistent is that people want the best, most reliable information in the shortest possible way. And that's what every user is looking for. And so it's funny that you mentioned that, because as their intent becomes more specific and as they want shorter answers, their questions are getting much longer. And we were even seeing this prior to the advent of AI, where users started talking to Google more like a person, even before AI was invented. And then Google just, that was a new keyword that you saw, and it would be 15 or 16 words long. And you said, is this a keyword or is this somebody working on like a thesis? I think AI accelerated that a lot, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say the main thing that is different is that AI just represents perhaps the biggest change to how people engage with information online since the invention of the search engine. And I think ChatGPT's market share shows that fairly well. Google's push for AI overview, I'm sure everybody's seen it. AI overview pushing local results, organic results, paid results, below the fold on mobile devices. I think all of that has a lot to do with it as well.
So, in terms of strategy, does that kind of begs the question of, is it really about all of the operators really taking the time to think through their differentiators? Who is their ideal prospect that they're trying to attract that may be different than somebody down the street, and almost creating keyword phrase strategy rather than just keyword strategy, or a question answer strategy? And how does that not only tie into your approach to Google and your bidding strategy, your keyword and negative keyword strategy, but how does it also maybe overlap with website design and search in general?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question too, because I think the core answer is that, again, at the very most fundamental level, the idea is still the same. Understand how the people who need your services are looking for you online. Easier said than done, for sure. But what I mean by that is that Google has a lot of things that it can give you in terms of just a better understanding, to pull back the curtain. One of them is a search terms report. Taking a look at that report for, say, the last 30 days or the last year will show you those specific keywords that people have been using that have found your brand online. And if you can even sort that table that Google shows you by conversions. So if you're interested in the search terms that led to you getting a lead or led to you getting a phone call, that's the fastest and most effective way to see. And I say that for two reasons, because the first is that there may be people who are searching for you who are now using different language than they did before. Maybe they are searching in extremely long questions, and maybe there's something that you just haven't seen before. And the other thing is that, like I was saying, there's a rise in queries concerning in-home care, things where people are interested in doing it themselves. That offers a strategic opportunity for some senior living providers to say, do we want to block these keywords and not show up for them at all? Or it gives you an opportunity to say, do we want to write content about the differences between us and in-home care, target this keyword with a very specific campaign that goes to a blog post that explains the differences, and see if we can actually bring some people over who may not have considered assisted living before, for example, but are now better educated and more prepared to engage with a community.
Yeah, I love that approach because if we're seeing that trend of senior living specific keywords going down, costs going up, but in home and home care based searches really going through the roof, then writing content about comparing the cost, the real cost of home care versus assisted living or senior living, which honestly always favors a community cost is always going to be
Always.
better.
Yes.
Things like questions to ask about in-home care. What happens when in-home care fails? Pros and cons, pluses and minuses. If we start writing that type of content, are we creating an opportunity for education and maybe attraction of a hidden audience that no one else is going for?
Absolutely, and which is in itself very valuable. It's if you are running a company, running a community, or running ads for a community where you see this for the first time, where you're now saying, who are these competitors that we're up against? Why did a Place for Mom's impression share? Why did it go from 10% to 80 overnight? That's something that you have the ability to look at and take a step back and say, this is what people are doing right now that are impacting us. Do we want to go up against them? Do we want to do just a raw budget increase because we think we can beat them in the long run? Or now to go back to the example of, say, writing a blog or promoting something that goes into the differences between in-home care and assisted living, do you want to go where the competition isn't? And do you want to try something different? And certainly that carries a level of risk to it. But I think that in an era like now, where things are changing so rapidly, where AI has come upon the general public so rapidly, I think that is something worth asking. And the risk of taking something new is, I would say, not always greater than the risk of doing the same old thing.
Yeah, I love that. One of my favorite books is Blue Ocean Strategy. Would
Mhm.
highly recommend it. And it really talks about that very dynamic where you think about when a Place for Mom drops a lead into the ecosystem that they've shared with 7 to 10 competitors, right? That's the red water. That's the piranhas that are feeding on a piece of flesh that gets dropped in the water, and it gets bloody really fast as people really are competing for that, if you will, or even to some degree only looking to book tours or do things that are really at the bottom of the funnel that are sales qualified leads and for people who are in consideration or decision phase. But the blue ocean and the real opportunity is balancing that because, yes, you do need urgent leads that are going to move in the next 30 days, no doubt about that. But the strategy of looking at the blue ocean of people who are not yet in crisis, but they know something's not right, something's not working, things are changing, going to have to make decisions in 3, 6, or 9 months. And then how do you balance maybe a Google ad strategy to give clients both the urgent, immediate needs, move-ins, but also help them build a pipeline? And what's the cost differential between being intentional about we got to get X number of sales qualified leads, SQLs, versus I also need to help them build a pipeline of MQLs? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And you took the words right out of my mouth, which is that it's really about building pipeline. One of the hardest things that we've encountered in senior living is when a sales team suddenly runs dry on leads, but they're only taking leads from, say, the past month or something like that. Or say like it's the first of a new month, and their policy is that at the end of the previous month, if a lead hasn't responded or something like that, they just mark it closed, even if it has only been around for 2 or 3 days. And there is a combination approach that I think scratches itches that help in a lot of different ways. The first is that if you're going to be hunting for elephants, looking for those rare, high value leads, then you're going to be spending a lot of money. And that isn't necessarily a different idea. It's just the cost of that has gone up because those are the same leads that everybody else is targeting too. And again, we're in that's another scenario where you say, do I want to go toe to toe with every single competitor, or do I want to go where they aren't? I would say the more overlooked strategy, particularly in senior living, is automated lead nurture and re-engagement with an existing group of leads that may not have done something in the past month. There are a lot of reasons why people might stop talking to a sales team. Senior living is an intensely emotional decision, particularly for adult children, particularly when it's made on behalf of a spouse. It requires a lot of coming to reality that is difficult for people who may need to admit that my mom finally needs memory care and things like that, or I can't do this anymore. There's guilt, there's hope, there's a lot of conflicting emotions that go into it. And with that in mind, there are a lot of reasons why someone may just go dark. And getting back in touch with those people can be much more effective than you may think. You may see just this giant database of leads and say, these are all the people we know will never move in. And on the contrary, we see a lot of success and growing success even with getting back in touch with them via email or a simple phone call outreach, leaving a voicemail, something that is light touch to show a certain amount of respect for what that person may be going through, and also letting them know there is an answer and there is a solution. And when you're ready, we're right here with it.
Yeah. It's definitely a balancing act. And I think we've become so dependent on Google Ads as being like something we can turn on pretty quickly. We can see results within a short amount of time. We know that it's going to take an investment. So a lot of times it's, hey, we've run dry. This is our quickest path to lead volume. Not always the quality we want, but certainly the quantity and the volume that we want. Is that changing? Do we need to revisit that playbook? Is Google really losing the dominance and giving other channels that opportunity? How should we be responding?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll start by saying, with everything that is publicly available right now, Google's market share of search as a concept online, whether it be through something like Google Discover, which is on Android phones, or the search engine, or AI mode, AI overview, whatever it is, Google is still top dog. So the but at the same time, there has never been a greater threat to Google's dominance than specifically ChatGPT and Claude. Those are the
Yeah.
two. Those are the two really big ones. And I think that requires a certain amount of monitoring impressions on the side of somebody who is working in this, is to understand that these tools don't necessarily mean a change in platform, although they certainly are a change in platform, but also what are the implications that they have for the change in user behavior, like we just discussed, where people may be searching longer, maybe looking for more specific questions or more specific answers rather, and going in that direction.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the things that we used to always count on in terms of how do we measure success and how that might change. And I feel like we need to interject at least something positive here, because I know we're saying
Yeah.
like everything's going up, right? And
Right.
leads are going down and everything's more competitive and there's this red water. But I think the other part of it is in losing part maybe of that market share or that audience share to AI overviews or AI in general. The leads that AI is generating have what, a 3 times greater conversion. Their intent
Absolutely.
is so much higher. Can you talk about the why behind what we're seeing with AI driven leads in terms of intent and conversion?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the big thing for AI leads that we know right now, and AI platform usage in general, is that people are much less apt to click to a separate website. They want their answer, they want it there, they want to learn more, everything like that. However, to your point just now, when people do click, it's because they have spent so much more time researching and because they have gotten so much more pointed and specific information that they feel confident in becoming a lead. And that confidence can go a long way because, yeah, the old adage used to be that 70% of a sales cycle is completed before anybody ever gets in touch with a salesperson. I am very eager to know what that percentage is now because I have a hunch it might be over 90. And not necessarily for anything that a sales team is doing incorrectly or not because the sales industry has changed, but just because the way in which people get information has changed. So I think in a broader sense, there is a lot of optimism because you can reach those people who are using AI tools. And I'm happy to say that while AI has its own understandings of what makes good content and what someone may be looking for, again, the old rules of SEO still apply to AI. People want good content that explains an answer, gives it to them quickly, and lets them walk away with something that they didn't have before. And there's a lot you can do with that, especially knowing some of the ins and outs of how these AI platforms work. If you're finding that you really want to get into ChatGPT, for example, and you're having a hard time discovering whether you ever even show up in ChatGPT, check to make sure that you have a Bing Webmaster Tools account set up. Bing Webmaster Tools is now becoming one of, I would say, the more underutilized tools that can lead to success. Because for anybody who doesn't know, Bing Webmaster Tools is your direct line to feeding information into Bing from your website. The reason that's important is because OpenAI and Microsoft have a very close partnership where ChatGPT uses Bing's index of the internet. And that means that if you're doing very well on Google, that may not mean at all that you're doing very well on ChatGPT. And it's because ChatGPT is looking at a different database of websites and what's considered good content and evaluating it in that way. So I think is the biggest thing to take a look at is that create your content, run ads, have a multi-channel approach to what could lead to tours, move-ins, etc. But take a look for those underutilized tools because I do believe that while Bing may have been the underdog for, I forget when it was founded, but for a while now,
Yeah.
this is their chance to reemerge. And if anything has shown us before, it's that Microsoft is very unwilling to just accept defeat. And this is one of those moments when I think that we can see that they're really going to start rising to the opportunity of claiming market share, of engaging with more people, and of becoming the search engine that people like to use.
Awesome. All right. Good advice. Let's pivot to a couple of things that you touched on. Let's dig into them a little bit deeper. One is competitor insights. I want to talk about that. And I also want to talk about, you had mentioned retargeting and how we can use some of the conversion data getting fed back from a CRM into your Google Ads account to better refine targeting. So can you talk about kind of competitor insights? How much can we really get in terms of understanding our competitors, what they're bidding on, how much they're spending? Are they bidding on our keywords, our brand name? How much is really divulged? And then maybe talk a little bit about targeting and re-engagement.
Sure, yeah. So Google Ads has a very handy tool called Auction Insights, which is one of the mainstays of Google Ads. And basically, what it'll do is show you for your entire account or a specific campaign in a certain time frame who is showing up more frequently against your brand in that time frame than, say, the preceding week or something like that. It's a very handy tool. The thing that it requires is a little bit of understanding about what you're really looking at because the primary metrics that they show you are based around something called impression share, which is how often you show up for the keywords that you're targeting. A higher impression share means that you're showing up more often. A lower impression share means that you are showing up less often. And basically what it'll do is show you by comparison, here's your impression share, and then here are the longest list I've ever seen is 18 competitors who may be showing up against you in that same time frame, in that same geo-targeting for those same keywords and things like that. So that's a great way to understand who your competitors are in Google Ads. And I say that because the people who compete against you in Google Ads are not always the community down the street. They might be the community in a neighboring city that is trying a new form of prospecting that is targeting your area specifically and trying to bring them over, seeing if they can get them to cross county lines, state lines, whatever it may be, because that is just the environment that we're in now with Google Ads, is that kind of experimentation phase. As far as retargeting goes, retargeting is such a fun topic because there's so many different ways that you can go with it. I'll say that the favorite tactic that we have at SLS is that the CRM Welcome Home has an integration with HubSpot. We're a HubSpot partner, so we love HubSpot. Not all of our clients have it, and that's totally fine. I get that it's not for everybody, but I absolutely love it for this one reason, and that is that HubSpot so far is the only marketing software that we have found to have a direct integration with Google Ads and a feature they call enhanced conversions. What enhanced conversions mean is that you now have the capability to have more accurate and more timely tracking of when someone completes an action that you want them to do, submitting a form, making a phone call, whatever it may be. And the handy thing is that HubSpot communicates with Welcome Home and Google Ads. So if a lead comes in from Google Ads, they get pushed into HubSpot. And then once they become sales qualified, they can get pushed into Welcome Home. Then that person schedules a tour or moves in. Then that data gets pushed back into HubSpot. And because of the enhanced conversion connection, HubSpot can now push that back into Google Ads. So Google is just passively learning about the qualities and the individuals who are starting to move into your communities. And that alone has made a world's worth of difference, especially when we come to talking about lead quality, because you're no longer just hunting for people who are going to do that top line conversion. You're no longer hunting for people who are just going to fill out a form. You're now hunting for people who are going to be most likely to schedule a tour or most likely to move in, as far as Google can tell. It's a very handy tool, and it is something that we find is very underutilized to the same extent of Bing Webmaster Tools, honestly.
Yeah, at the end of the day, what our clients want us to do is go get more leads who look like people who tour deposited and moved in. So the more that we can segment that data out and use that for our strategy, the better it's going to be for everybody. And then how do you determine whether your paid media is generating new demand versus just intercepting families who are already going to convert?
Yeah, I think one of the handiest things that you can do is have, again, that full integration with a CRM, Google Ads, and marketing software. Because the one of the most interesting things I think in senior living is seeing how many times people will reach out to get back in touch with you on their own. I was just speaking with a client this morning on a meeting about somebody who came through on an ad in Google, and we took a look at their contact record in HubSpot, and we said they converted this morning, and then also they converted last month and the month before and the month before. And it's almost like clockwork. Around the middle of the month for the past 3 months, this one person has come back every time. And sometimes it's been to download a brochure. One time it was to schedule a tour and then they canceled it. And the question is, this person's definitely interested in us. Maybe they're equally interested in other senior living companies as well. But that's somebody that I want to reach out to because they definitely remember us if they're coming back every month and it's April and they've been back and downloaded 4 different pieces of collateral from our website.
I love that we can measure all that and
Yes.
see down to the individual. Lead quality versus lead volume. We just can,
Mhm.
I can't remember what study it was that you referenced that said that 20 to 30% of ad spend is typically wasted. Where does that come from? What's the strategy to try to combat that, if at all? And then how do you work with people want this, I want 40 leads a month, but what's the
Mhm.
quality? Are you willing to take fewer that have higher quality? Or are you willing to spend more time in educating and nurturing and sorting through? So maybe just talk about the wasted spend and then any strategy around that's going to balance the quality and quantity conundrum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that everybody has at their advantage right now in the age of AI and CRMs and everything is having a CRM that has objective data on every individual person that comes by your company. That data a lot of CRMs let you export it, export all of that data, plug it into ChatGPT, see what the similarities are, and then use that to inform your targeting, your messaging, everything like that that you can run in Google Ads. That is one way to make sure that not only are you targeting the right people, but you're also speaking in a way that is similar to what they would expect or even that they're speaking. Sorry, I just blanked. We have to cut this. I just blanked on it. Sorry. Can you
That's
repeat that?
okay. Oh, it's just about lead quality versus volume and where the waste is
Yes.
and what's the strategy around it. So you can just take it from the top because we're just going to edit this anyway.
Yeah.
Want me to reframe it and we'll start from the top?
No, I think I got it. Thank you. I'm good. Should we like
Okay, I'll just tee it
carry
up
and cut
again.
here?
Yeah, Carrie Ann, cut
Yeah.
here. Leah, cut here. So, Chris, let's talk about the study that said like 20 to 30% of ad spend is typically wasted. What are the reasons? How do you combat it? And maybe talk about the kind of the quality quantity conundrum.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed that is true across, regardless of time, regardless of tools, whatever may be happening, is I talk to your sales team. A healthy communication cadence and a healthy relationship between a sales team and a marketing team is so valuable to have once they realize they're on the same team. It's been something that I've noticed in a lot of different industries, senior living sometimes. I used to work in education, that sales and marketing teams are not always going hand in hand, and in some cases maybe even be adversarial, which is has always fascinated me because in theory we're all moving toward the same goal. And I think that is something that is very easy to fall into because it can sometimes feel like feedback winds up being blame or things like that. So the biggest recommendation I can make to any company just generally is make sure that your marketing and sales teams are talking to each other, talking about what's working, talking about what's not working, who's moving in, who isn't, and then most importantly, pairing those conversations with the data that you have in your CRM. CRMs are such a blessing to the overall marketing and sales process just because they are objective. You're no longer talking about what something feels like or what it seems to be. You know what it is, and here are the 7 or 8 data points that show you exactly why. And by aligning with what you're seeing in your CRM, you can take a 20,000, 30,000 foot view of, say, export all the people who moved in the past year, export all the data points you have about them, upload that spreadsheet into ChatGPT and say, tell me what all these people have in common. And now all of a sudden you're looking at some of the most common properties that people have when they are choosing to move into a community. Use that information to update your targeting. Oh, they're all coming from the same 3 towns that are around yours. The language, do you have, say, in HubSpot, where they came from in terms of search or any kind of keyword data that you're seeing you can align in your other search tools and use that to reframe how you present yourself. Speak in a way that is in alignment with the colloquialisms of your location, and make sure that you're engaging with people on their terms and on their levels, which is easier said than done for sure. And I think when it comes to the balance of volume and quality, the again, I've said this a lot today, but the same old idea of iterative improvement is just still in play. You're not looking for the changes that you're going to make that are going to take you from no leads yesterday to 120 leads tomorrow. You're looking for the changes that are going to be, we got 13 leads this week, let's try this. And now the following week, we got 14. That's a good start. Let's let it run for another week so that we can make sure that this isn't a fluke and that we can accommodate for seasonality and market changes and stuff like that. And look at your ads as a staircase. It's not going to be a rocket ship. If you're very lucky, sometimes it is a rocket ship. I've been doing this for about 16 years, and I think I've seen that happen maybe twice. So it really is important to think in terms of just, this is our goal, this is what we want, and now here are the different steps that we have to get there. And it's going to take a while, but it's like the 1% principle. If you're 1% better every day, by the end of the year, you're 3.5 times better than you were at the beginning of the last year. That's exactly what you want to do for your ads.
That's great advice. I like the stair step. I haven't heard that before. So let's talk about kind of future proofing your channel mix. So if search demand is flattening, costs are rising, where should senior living marketers shift budget over the next 2 to 3 years? So really talking about diversification, any underpriced channels that are worth experimentation, and then what's oversaturated or overrated right now in your opinion?
Sure. Yeah. So I think again, returning to the kind of foundational concepts of just website marketing in general, digital marketing in general, to echo Rand Fishkin from many decades ago, the key to success is just good content. So it doesn't matter if it's promoted through ads, doesn't matter if people find it through AI or SEO, social media, organically, whatever it may be. That is what is going to determine whether people interact with you, is the experience that they have on your website. And so much of that comes down to, are you meeting their expectations? And everything else we've discussed in this podcast is, how do you identify and cater to those expectations? So that's the biggest part. Just make sure that your content is good. The other thing that I would say is, in terms of platforms, is that Google is and continues to be the bread and butter for senior living. It is more expensive than it once was, and at the same time, still more affordable than a lot of other platforms. Still better at appealing to people who have a high intent than a lot of other platforms. And for that reason, I hesitate to say that it's going anywhere. It has its issues. I'm not saying it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, there is not a platform or a company that allows you to engage with the same audience and use the same systems to identify who is priority as Google does. And in that respect, Google is very valuable, even when it is highly competitive. Some of the other areas that I'll say that I personally think are underutilized right now, Reddit ads is probably the biggest one that I see nobody talking about for senior living. Reddit is just a fascinating platform. If anyone's familiar with like how it got started and what it used to be and now what it is, it's absolutely crazy to think that the website that started as Reddit is now, as I like to say, the front page of the internet. But it is. And it has a huge usership. There are communities on it that are built around senior living. They don't always use the term senior living. A lot of them might use the term, say, aging parents, for example, but they dovetail perfectly with, say, the intent or the demographic information that we know aligns with adult children in particular. And as Gen X and millennials are now becoming those adult children, Reddit is where they spend a lot of time. And it's a great place to make sure that you can engage with them. I'll also say Facebook, while Facebook is a bit more obvious, Facebook is such an interesting case to me. The Facebook at one point we used primarily for event promotion, because if you can put a deadline on something in Facebook, it just really helps in getting someone to come physically walk through your door. And then recently, as we've begun experimenting with it, we have found opportunity in Facebook to just do raw lead generation for prospects that get pushed into a CRM, talk to a salesperson and things like that, which was not always the case. In the past, we've seen that Facebook had a cost per lead that could be anywhere as high as 10 times that we had on Google. And now finally, we're finding these niches, these areas of opportunity where we're starting to see those cost per leads even out more. Part of that is because of the rising cost on Google. Part of it also is because as the rest of the world is changing, Facebook has also been changing. It's just not as cool to talk about as ChatGPT and Claude right now. And for that reason, it's a little bit of, I would say, a dark horse. Even with everybody using it, reevaluate what you're doing because you may not be using it to the fullest extent of the options that are available to you. And then I think there's just a whole suite of other platforms that are just ripe for experimentation. Netflix is introducing ads. That's amazing. Hulu has ads. There are companies called, one of which is called StackAdapt, that will help you publish videos out to just a ton of different streaming services. Aside from them, you have Pinterest, Nextdoor, all of these places, Yelp even, where you have these kind of just small opportunities, but in those opportunities, it's similar to the idea of riches are in the niches. If you can make those properties work for you, you no longer have a reliance on a single colossal lead generator. You don't have your eggs in one basket. You're now more evenly spread out so that if one platform has a sudden change, the other platforms can help you maintain stability. And that diversification, I think, going into 2026 and probably the year after is going to be key to maintaining a healthy pipeline.
And really, the way you amplify the results in your paid digital strategy is to complement that with a really intentional organic strategy.
Oh, for sure.
Optimize that SEO,
Yep.
look at schema changes to align better with how AI searches, replace large blocks of text with skimmable content, and make sure to add those FAQs that we used to be able to put into Google Business Profiles, and then they, thank you very much, remove them.
Good old days, the good old days.
But reestablishing those on the website so every single property and location in your portfolio has an FAQ that's highly localized, because you will see AI really latching on to those easy to skim, easy to pull over into overviews. So everything you do on the organic side, right, is only going to amplify the success of your paid digital strategy.
Absolutely. To take a quick detour into organic, the place where I see the most opportunity for so many senior living companies is have a video on your homepage, on your community page, a video tour walkthrough, an overview, a voiceover, whatever form, a talking heads, testimonials, whatever form of video you want to have a video on your website. And for that matter, upload it to your YouTube channel as well. Because video, the thing that's not going away is that people watch. They don't always read, they skim, for example. FAQs are great because they cater to that skimming, but people will watch something that engages them, and having those videos on your website is such a positive way to diversify the content that you know is already good, and you're just presenting it in a different way.
Yeah, I love that. All right, last question. You ready for it?
I hope so.
All right. What is the biggest threat in paid digital for senior living that most operators are underestimating right now?
I think the biggest threat is that people are underestimating how crowded it's about to get. I was saying earlier, there is a certain level of sophistication happening in the senior living industry right now that just wasn't present before. We're seeing new competitors showing up in auction insights that we had never seen before. We're seeing that the mom and pop community down the street suddenly has $15,000 a month that they're going to push into Google ads. Where did that come from? Who knows? But here they are. And I think that's going to happen more because previously there was some excitement about digital marketing in senior living. It did have some healthy participation from senior living in general, but it was never something that was the ultimate focal point of a way for a community to grow. And I think that as people have begun expanding into digital marketing and started communicating more, because our industry is very small. So it doesn't take much for one person to say, this is what we started doing, and someone else says, what's that digital marketing thing? They look it up online, they go down the rabbit hole. And then not to mention, just hear from SLS, we know that there are more people than ever offering digital marketing services to senior living. Not to say that all of them are ideal for senior living. Some of them are dipping their toe into the water to see if they're a good fit. But I think that along with that, that comes with a certain level of education that wasn't present before. So understand who your competitors are in search. I think that is something that is going to help a lot of particularly smaller operators come to understand their kind of digital landscape of what may work and what won't, because it is crowded. There are a lot of people here right now, but it works. And I think the fact that it works is not going to change, because even with how expensive leads are from Google right now, you need one and you can pay for your entire month's budget after that person moves in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute.
Sure.
If listeners would want you to audit their Google Ads account, what's the best way for them to reach out to you? Would you be willing to do
Yeah.
some free audits and help give them some insights?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We love to help people take a look under the hood and give second opinions. Reach out to me at CZOOK, Zook at seniorlivingsmart.com, and I'll hear from you.
That's awesome. And I know I said I wasn't going to ask you one more question, but it just came to me. So I'm going to throw one in. And it's really a point of view question more than anything else. All we do is senior living marketing. We live it, breathe it, love it. And we have a very strong point of view about Google Ads management and kind of the model of a pay per a percentage of spend versus a flat management fee. So can you explain how we arrived at this point of view and why we're so passionate about it?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing I'll say is that we work on a per community basis, regardless of what spend may be. And the reason that we do that is that, simply said, I think it is a conflict of interest for someone to charge you for services based on how much money you're spending on ads, because they are the same people who can come back and tell you to increase your budget. So if you're paying somebody a percentage of spend, it's almost like you're incentivizing them to have their only recommendation, their top recommendation, whatever it may be, to just spend more, because the more you spend, the more they make. A lot of people that have a lot of opinions on that, I understand that. From my perspective, that is an unethical way to run a digital ads agency and a digital ads department. And for that reason, we take a look on the per community basis so that we don't have that incentive of just saying, oh, this month, how about you up your spend $500 more? And don't forget, you're going to be giving us $100 more. Factor that in too. We're not going to play that game. We're going to work for what's best for the community.
Yep. That is our point of view. So, Chris Zook, thank you for joining us today and sharing your senior living marketing perspectives with us. We will put Chris's contact information. And if we have any resources, I think we probably have a guide about paid digital ads and AI that we could put into the show notes. But thanks for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.